tricky. The second day, they the nurses came by and they're like, oh, we need to take the baby for vaccination. So BCG. My mom took him there. He got vaccinated. He was fine during the day. But then, as we were approaching evening, suddenly his fever spiked. And my mom was like, this is not normal. We need to take him to the nursery so they can have a look at him. So took him to the nursery and they were like, he needs to stay here. We need to have a close check on him. And then at that time, they were like, this is this is our schedule. As a mom, you have to come here every 2 hours to breastfeed. So I had to see him every 2 hour interval. Now, you're looking at someone who's just had a C-section done. I could barely walk normally, but and the distance between my room and the nursery was very long, but I still had to do that walk every day, every 2 hours, regardless of whatever time. So started doing that. The first day, nothing changed. The baby's fever was still spiking. They were not giving him any medication. And as a new mom, the one thing you don't want is your baby not being fine, because already there's like so much going on in your brain. You just want to go home. You just want to sit down. You just want to rest. Now your baby is not fine, and you go from being at the mercy of someone taking care of you now at the mercy of nurses having to look at your child, you know? And so the first day, they were not giving him medication. His fever was getting bad, and I was getting emotional. The second day, still the same thing. And I remember just crying one day because I was seated outside in the afternoon, waiting for the 2 hours to be done so I can go back in for the breastfeeding session. And I could just hear the babies in the nursery cry, and they were crying. They had been crying for like 30 minutes. I went and knocked just to like see mine because I was like, I don't think it matters that I have to wait for 2 hours. If the baby is crying, can I at least see him? You know, because it's really breaking me. And the nurse there was like, no, we can't allow you to see him. The rules are the rules. 2 hours. And I was like, but this is my child. Like, if he's crying and I feel like I'm the person who can stop him crying, I would rather come in and stop him from crying. And I remember she just did not have it. And I was like, if that's the case, then give me my baby because you guys are not giving him any medication. His fever is still up. There is no change. He is as weak as he can be. And at the end of the day, you're refusing me from seeing my child. That does not make sense to me. It baffles me. So give me my baby. At least I know if I have him close by, he can breastfeed. He doesn't have to cry as much as he's crying in there. They're like, no, babies need to cry, they need to find their voice. And that's the one thing that annoyed me because it was like a baby can't find his voice by crying for an hour or two. At the end of the day, all you're doing is like, what are we doing? I was literally like, what are we doing? What exactly is going on? And I remember my mom, because I had been crying so much, my mom just started shouting. She was like, I will fight anyone. Give me my grandson. If you're not going to give this child any medication, I would rather you bring me my child. And that was a time when it raised an alarm. So a doctor came in, checked the baby. He was like, oh my God, the fever is too high. He has an infection. We need to start giving him medication. And I was like, you guys waited until we sounded alarm for you guys to think this child needs medication. It was crazy to me because I was like, and what if he died? What then were you going to do? Oh, we hadn't seen that it was a need for him to be on medication. It didn't make sense. So they did that. They started giving medication. So they had to put a cannula on his hand. And imagine, this is a newborn. There you are putting a cannula on a newborn's hand just for you to be like putting medication in his body. And they were injecting him with cristapen and gentamicin. These are like the hardest, meds you can find. Even as older humans, when we're injected with them, it's difficult But there was a baby being given this medication, and he couldn't cry. Each and every time they would administer medication to him, he never cried, not one bit. And that's the part where I was like, this child is really sick. Like, he's not doing fine. Because on a normal day, a baby should cry if he's being given something that's very heavy, but he never did. So he was given medication for about 3 or 4 days, and then that's when his fever started getting down. During the time, I couldn't dress him in, like, couldn't put any clothes on him. Every 2 hours that I would go see him, I would take a cloth, um like, get it wet with cold water and just press it around his body, so that maybe, like, the fever could kind of get down a bit. And it used to help. Like, it would get normal for a bit before rising again. So every 2 hours, that was like my routine. Take a cloth, get it wet, and, gently press it. But it was difficult, especially because I still was healing from my wound. So I wasn't fully healed, but I was expected to do things like a normal person, like a woman who had gone through a vaginal birth. And so it was a very awkward moment for me. Um, so we went in on the first. So Evan was born on the 1st of December, um, and we got out, I think, about 5 or 6 days later, from the hospital when his fever had gotten down. Um, the doctor came in, checked him. He was like, "Oh, this is fine. Now we can just give you medication to administer at home and whatnot." But then the one thing that I struggled with during that week was breastfeeding, because my boobs